Well, welcome to ATG Live, your Thursday night home for all things Star Wars. I'm one of your hosts, Pete Fletcher. I'm here, as always, as usual. It's not always, because sometimes I'm not here, sometimes you're not here. As usual, as is the norm, with my co-host, Mr. Nick Milkey. Nicholas, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic, and I think, if I've done the math correctly,
yes,
this is my first ATG Live in like 3 or 4 weeks, because
that is true.
Last week was Thanksgiving, maybe.
Yes,
and the week before that, I was gone, and Chris was here, and then there was another week. Like, we've had a bunch of stuff going on, so I have been out of the loop on ATG Live. Of course, we got to do our Skeleton Crew show 2 days ago, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit. But I am beyond thrilled to be back in my normal ATG Live co-pilot's chair, flying this hunky chunk of space trash, whatever we want to call this.
Yeah, call it that.
Yeah, I'm here. It's Thursday. It's time for a drink and a Star Wars.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Since you haven't been here in a while, let me tell you what this show is. On Thursday nights, me and Nick get together. We talk about Star Wars. We have a drink. We have great guests. And tonight we're going to be joined by Becca Benjamin from the Tarkin's Top Shelf podcast. We do the Star Wars news of the week. We do the conversation. We look at your chats. We look at what you have to say and get you involved in the conversation. But if you want to be even more involved, if you want to be a part of the SSW Network family, join our Patreon program for as little as $3 a month. You will be having early access to podcasts. You're going to have the ability to be part of interviews that we do with celebrity guests. But as the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks go on, you're also going to get to be a part of our live post-game show for Skeleton Crew that we call Beyond the Barrier. We recorded the first one this week. And what we will be doing is every Tuesday night, right after the show, top of the hour, so it's probably around 10 o'clock East Coast time, we are going to go live to record our podcast called Beyond the Barrier, as I said, which will go in depth into the show we just watched. Now, the difference between our show and the 4,264 other post-game shows is we're going to do it live. We're going to do it straight after we watch the show. So if you're looking for deep dive Easter eggs, catch our friends like Screen Crush and our friends over at Heavy Spoilers, because they spend the time and they go deep into it. We're going to talk about our reaction, which I think that's what being a fan's all about. Nick, what do you think? It's about reacting and how it washes over you.
That's 100% what it's about. And I'm so excited. And we've talked about coming into this show, living in the moment, really. Not, I may have a notepad to make a couple of notes as we watch these episodes. This week, we had the luxury of the episodes dropped on Monday and we recorded on Tuesday. But going forward, we're going to do it an immediate true after show. So there's not going to be tons of time to process. It's going to be, reactions in the moment, which I'm really thoroughly excited for. But that's also not going to give us time to deep scrub every episode for, every tiny, brick and screw that relates to some other show that, references 12 other things. So it's going to be genuine and in the moment, which I'm
absolutely, and that's the great thing about becoming a Patreon member and joining us for those shows, because we're gonna give you the opportunity to call in, and you're gonna see things, and you're gonna want to tell. Look, when I was watching it this past week, I saw Baj Falfa, and I was like, I gotta tell. So I actually sent a note over to our friend Ryan Airy over at Screen Crush. I was like, did you catch that Easter egg? We want to get your Easter eggs, so join us. It's only $3 a month, and you also get swag, you get early access, you get a bunch of other cool things. So head on over to the sswnetwork.com to do that. What else do we need to tell the good folks about? We have all of our social medias. Nick, why don't you talk a little bit about all of those things?
We do have all the social medias. We, still dropping some show announcements on Twitter, but for the most part, we have migrated, like everyone else has, away from Twitter into Blue Sky and Threads. We have Instagram. We have Facebook. If you're old like us, that means you still use Facebook. So all of those handles, all of those channels are the same at the SSW Network. You can find us everywhere. You can also find all of those at the sswnetwork.com, which is our website. Pete, you've mentioned the Patreon program. We would love to have folks join and be a part of that. But I'm going to push a little bit because it is the holiday season.
Yes.
We have merchandise like every other podcast on Earth. We have silly t-shirt designs. We have pint glasses. We have flags. I mean, you name it, you can get silly things everywhere. We don't have, and we may just have to add it to the SSW Network show because it is kind of the little engine that could. If you've watched this show for any number of years, you know that I had on the Podcast of the Wills TeePublic page a McRib Christmas sandwich t-shirt,
yes.
which is the dumbest thing on earth. It was made as an in-joke for a show that I was a guest on. And probably to this point, I think I've sold 100 of those shirts. So if you want a weird t-shirt to wear to an office Christmas party coming up, there's nothing better than a McRib sandwich with a Santa hat on it that says "McRib you a Merry Christmas."
It makes no sense, Nick. It makes no sense.
It makes 0 sense. But literally, like twice a week, I get an email that says you've made a sale, and every time it's a McRib T-shirt that someone has bought for their, if that's your thing. But it's a great time to get gifts for yourself because really, who else is going to buy you our dumb Star Wars T-shirts? You got to do that for yourself. Treat yourself, get some merch. All of those things are on the sswnetwork.com.
And you know what, Nick? If you use the code SHILL15, you're going to get 15% off your entire order.
Even better. Gifts for yourself and saving money. It's like you're required to do it.
2 for 2,
man. It was on sale. I had to.
That's what my wife tells me. So,
exactly.
Oh my God, I sounded like a 1950s cartoon, like the Flintstones. What the fuck? Why? To the moon, Alice, to the moon. Nick, before we get to our guests, the other thing that we always have to do, we did Snoketober. We did Snokevember. Nick, we can't let that go. What is the December version of our
It's the end of the year, and if we're going to do anything on this show, we're going to drink our way through the holidays. So it is Darthcember. We picked up Darthcember last year as the little caboose to our 3-month holiday train of seasonal beer chugging. So the process is the same. You pour yourself a delicious beer in a pint glass of any kind. Because it is Darthcember, you do swap your Snoke for a Darth Vader.
Okay, swapping your Snoke. That
swapping
sounds
Snoke.
So if I sounds like if I heard my son say that, I would say, "Watch your mouth, young man."
Caught a bunch of teenagers behind the football field swapping Snokes. So we've got a Darth Vader, and for these purposes, we have a vintage Darth Vader, which means it's probably coated in like irradiated lead paint. But
Sure.
Darth Vader is going to go into the beer, and we're going to do this toast style. I'm going to raise this glass tonight to our good friend Jeff Qualio. He is a patron and friend of the show, and he is just going through some difficult life stuff right now. So I want to send all of our good Force Light feelings to Jeff and to his family. And we are going to Darthcember this one up just for him. So Pete, if you will hit our audio drop, it works just the same as Snoketober, but it's a Darth clip.
Here we go.
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master.
Beer.
There you go. Nice. Very nice, Nick. Well done. I will join you next week.
Happy Darth
I promise.
Simber.
We got here's a challenge for anybody listening or watching, or if you're on Twitter, tweet this out at ATGLive or at ATGcast. That's where you're going to get me. I'm still on Twitter, and I know people are still watching this on Twitter. So tweet at me. If we do this into January, what should we call it? We had Snoketober, we had Snokevember, we had Darthcember, and what are we going to do in January? And if you I'll tell you what, if you give us the name, we'll get you a Snoketober sticker. And we'll give you a little something for you there. But Nick, we have an awesome show to get to tonight. We have some really cool news stories. We have an amazing guest in Becca Benjamin. We're going to dig into Skeleton Crew just a bit. Again, a little bit different take than we took during our after show. probably dig into some specific details. I know, Nick, you have a hot take. I have a theory as well. We'll hit some of that, but we're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by our good friend and Podathon co-chair. I guess that's what we call ourselves, the chair people, right?
Totally.
Yep.
Totally.
Co-chair, Becca Benjamin from Target's Top Shelf. But we'll be back in just 1 minute with more ATG Live.
What's up, my fellow Gen X Star Wars fam? My name is Chris Rhines from Broaxium. You may know me from ATG's Force Connect that I co-hosted with Pete and Nick. Now, I'm the owner and operator of Broaxium Outpost, an online shop for all your action figure and collectibles needs like Star Wars Black Series, G.I. Joe Classified, Star Wars Vintage Collection, Marvel Legends, Star Wars Black Series and Vintage Collection, Transformers Studio Series, Star Wars action figures, Masters of the Universe, and much, much more, including Star Wars action. Alright, I have a lot of Star Wars stuff, I'm just saying. Stop by and check out the store at www.proaxiumoutpost.com. Sign up to become a part of the Bounty Hunters Guild and stay updated on new pre-orders, sales, and exclusive Proaxium content. Find something you like? Use the promo code ATG5 for 5% off your first order. We have Star Wars figures, by the way.
Hey, it's Broaxium Outpost. Go do it. They're our sole sponsor right now. I like to call them a sponsor. It just sounds cooler. But seriously, go over it. As when Chris was on the show last week, the way I put it to our listeners was, you're going to buy this stuff anyway. Why not support a fellow fan, one of the most positive guys? He's the only guy out of all the people we know who is just constantly just gimme. Like, I can't find anything he dislikes about Star Wars. And that's a good thing. And he's just a great guy. He's trying to get Broaxium Outpost off the ground. So if you're going to buy something for the holidays, please head on over to broaxiumoutpost.com and use that code ATG5 and you will get 5% off the order. So go ahead and check that out. Well, we are joined tonight, Nick, by a wonderful guest, a good friend of ours, good friend of the show. Let's bring in Becca Benjamin. Becca Benjamin in the house. How are you?
Tired. And a little snowed in. But yeah, you're okay.
I was watching the Buffalo game on Sunday night, and I thought to myself, how's Becca doing? Because you're up there in Hinterland.
Yeah, I'm only 5 miles from that stadium.
Oh, are you? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, it's been great.
Luckily, you had Skeleton Crew to watch. So
I did. Yeah.
So Becca, before we jump in, tell the few people who watch us that don't know who you are a little bit about who you are and where what you do, and a little bit about Target's Top Shelf as well.
Well, like you guys, I do Star Wars because, Star Wars is a verb. Thanks, Carrie Fisher. And you do it. So, yeah. So I have a podcast as well. I love the Star Wars books. So we typically review Star Wars books and interview some of the authors. Sometimes we go beyond that and interview those that are actually, have parts in Star Wars, voice actresses and actors and all that stuff. It's great fun. And we just put a positive spin on everything, even though it may not be our favorite. We always try and do our best to keep it positive and uplifting, and Star Wars is therapy. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell.
I mean, that's such a great point. It's funny. I have seen, in fact, I posted a little thing because I can't help but stir the pot a little bit, me, but there's a couple people who have been just the worst side of Star Wars fandom who, like Skeleton Crew, they are actually enjoying the show and they're saying it, and they're getting pissed off that their followers are like, oh, I guess you're a shill now. And it's so funny because it's kind of proof. Look, you don't have to love everything. You and I and Nick, we probably all have very different opinions on the Acolyte, right? And but there were things to like about it. There were probably things we didn't like about it, but not one of us would ever tell somebody they're wrong for liking any of it. And so it's so interesting to see the way Skeleton Crew is actually hitting so many people. Becca, what was your initial impression after the first 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew this week?
I just reconnected with the who I was back when. And I think that is the feeling we've been pretty much looking for, especially those who have been around since the beginning. And I cannot take credit for that phrase. That is something that Mark Suter has been using on our show, but he nails it with that, because that's exactly what this is. From the moment I saw the first little TV spots, you do get that feeling that, like, you remember when you would go see, I mean, you guys are there. You guys are my generation. So, all the Brat Pack things, right? Like when we were growing up, most of the A-list actors and actresses were kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That's what happened throughout the 80s. So we grew up, with these kid actors and actresses, like the Coreys and people who don't know, that's Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. And so, yeah, I think all those feelings come in, because when I received my little package from Swagman and my 24-year-old was home and she thought I had ordered food. It was really funny. I'm like, no, I didn't order food. And she brought in this box and
you DoorDashed to Swagman.
Right. That's what she thought. And I was opening up everything, and she couldn't get over my reaction. She's like, oh my God, I've never seen you like this. You're like 10. So she got to see that excitement. And it's like sitting down with this show is like everything I grew up with in the 80s. It brings me back to that person. I feel so much younger when I'm watching it. So it's a cool perspective, because you can relate to each one of those kids, right?
Yep.
Whether it be for yourself or I had a friend like that. Something like that. But then you can also see yourself in the parents. So it's like this weird thing, because you can see yourself in the kids, you see yourself in the parents, and you just, you get it. You're there. You forget what else is going on. And it's kind of what Stranger Things did, especially like in that first season. And it's also, like I said, it's like Goonies, Monkey Island, all that stuff. And it's just like, I've missed you. Where have you been?
100%. Well, and
so,
you keyed on something, and I actually said this to you when I texted you over a month ago and asked you to be on this week. You are one of my favorite people to listen to talk about Star Wars, because as a mom, you bring that maternal perspective to so many things. You talk a lot about Shmi and Anakin, in the prequels. You talked about, Leia and Obi-Wan in the Kenobi show. Like, you bring that, and I'm a parent too. Pete and I are dads, but that paints a lot of what we do. But there's a difference in a maternal perspective and a paternal perspective. And so I knew coming into a show that's about kids and about kids lost in space, you were going to have big feelings about that. So that's what I want to dig into for a minute. What was the mom part of you like watching these first 2 episodes? Because you are a mom and you're watching kids. We got a couple different single parents. We have the undersecretary. We have Wendell, Wim's dad. But talk to us about the mom perspective of these first 2 episodes.
Well, the first child that I'm like completely drawn to is Wim. First of all, book enthusiast, absolutely love you, Wim. And those stories are what fills the void of the emptiness of having someone at home. And watching Wim, I kind of started asking myself, God, did my kids ever feel that way? Because there was a point in their life when I was a single mom and I'd have to go to work and pack all their lunches. Okay, I'm going to see you guys later. So here's what you all got to do, because I'm working late tonight. Granted, my mother would be there to get them off the bus and do things with them, but I still left them, with, I wasn't going to be home until later. So you start to wonder, because I can get where Wim, like, you could see it. That moment when he asks his dad to read the stories like mom used to, that got me so bad, because he's like, aren't you getting a little old for that? I'm like, for shame. How do you say that to your child? This child is crying out to you. So, that's the first child that I'm connecting with. Neil seems to be the one that's really has a good home life, right? He's that kid that everyone, kind of wishes they had that lifestyle with their parents and their siblings, even though they're too cool to say it, right? So he's that. And then Fern and, well, KB, we haven't seen that dynamic yet with family, but Fern, she's the rebel child. Mother has very high expectations, and that child's like, yeah, I want none of it. I want to get as far away as I can. Hence the racing as fast as she can go.
Yep.
She's trying to get away from that.
I was worried because I saw my daughter in Fern, because my daughter kicks butt in school, but she's also now at that point where she's like, I know she's rebelling, and I'm seeing some of it at home. I know she's not racing. I don't think she's racing motorcycles or anything.
No.
But I know that she's like, she's flipping her coat inside out when she comes in. I mean, that was one of the cool things
that detail
that came out about the fact that she wears her coat inside out when she's racing, and she wears it the right way when she's at school. And
and that's very Ferris Bueller. Like if you think like that scene in between her and Wim. Well, what did you do to get in here? That's Charlie Sheen and Jennifer Grey.
Correct.
Totally.
At the police
but
station.
Just in a kid, right? But just in kids. So I was dying over that because you could see them pulling all these things in that we grew up with from all over the board, and it's just fabulous. Just fabulous.
Yeah. Well, and I love too, and we've been through. There's the ones that we've heard as we've talked about it for the last couple of days. All the classics: Goonies, E.T., Flight of the Navigator, all those, but bringing Ferris Bueller into it. Yeah, Explorer's a huge one. Bringing Ferris Bueller into it. That's a great one. It didn't hit me in the moment, but it hit me just now when you were talking about it with Wim's dad and the reading the stories. That's Peter Pan. That's Wendy in the nursery.
Yep.
This is your last night in the nursery, which Hook. I talked a little bit about Hook, but that Peter Pan concept of kids growing up and aren't you supposed to be too old for this? Yeah, and I felt that as a parent too, that moment when he's like, I'm not doing that. You're a little too old. Like, I've got 12 and 16-year-olds that still want me to lay on their floor while they fall asleep because that's what and I'm like, of course, until you don't want me anymore, I've got you.
And you never say no to reading. Reading is so fundamental. Come on.
100%. Yeah,
exactly.
Wow.
Right. We grew up with that with the Goonies, E.T., and reading is fundamental. That's right.
That's right.
Exactly.
I read books so I could get free pizzas from Pizza Hut. Come on. We got to read all the books we can.
Yeah, do what you got to do. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Becca, when we were going back and forth a little bit about coming on the show, you said that you got some big thoughts and some big. We've gone through. We went through scene by scene practically with our Beyond the Barrier show, and but let's talk themes. Let's talk thoughts. Let's talk. What are some of there's so many things. I have to say so many things, and it's a weird feeling I have. And before I let you dive in, I want to start. I'm being very cautious to not overanalyze this show, because there's so much that I want to be like, well, if I look at this, that means that it took place at this point, and this was happening here, which means that this could happen. But I think as a Star Wars fan at the level that we tend to be, it's hard not to do that. So I'm really curious to see what sort of thinking you're going to throw into overdrive for me with some of your thoughts on the show.
Yeah, I'm trying not to overthink as well, but it's very hard. I actually laid out, it is. I actually laid out everything I wanted to talk about to my co-host via text, and he's like, oh my God. And I said, okay, here's all my evidence to back this up. And he's like, okay, we have to talk about this. I said, yeah, I know we'll get more in depth with it, but I don't even know where you want me to start, because
I have a place I want you to start. I have one.
Okay.
Pete and I are notoriously bad at books, but especially we are notoriously bad at the High Republic. And I know that there are strains of the great work and that kind of stuff. So I would love for you to give us, especially as we're talking about add-in, is it Truman Show? Is it, whatever's going on, but how that connects certainly with, what from High Republic stuff.
Okay. So I am just going to start with Atten as a place.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's this corporation that we got in Legends, but we got it in canon in the Phasma novel, 2017 by Dawson. It's called Constar Mining Corporation. Okay. That's what devastated Phasma's planet. And Constar has been around since over 100 years. They don't give the exact, over 100 years before Battle of Endor. So in the High Republic era, it's been around since then. And what they would do is they distributed mining facilities throughout the Republic on separate worlds, Parnosus being one of them. And what they would do is they would have these colonies, and they would mine precious treasure, which they refer to as ore.
Mhm.
So it was like an eternal treasure known as this ore. So they would literally set up, ready for this? I want to make sure I got the right wording because I made notes.
This is why we have
They
Becca
would-
on, because she is you're like a living Wikipedia. It's amazing.
They set up what's called defense grids, barriers, to protect the population and to protect from others coming in. Barriers, which is also very similar to what we hear in the High Republic, known as the occlusion zone, the OZ by the Nile, which put that up around so no one could get through without, disintegrating pretty much. So defense grids to me are kind of what came out of the occlusion zone to keep these mining facilities safe. And yes, they were very suburban type colonies, because if you go into the Phasma novel, when Phasma and her clan, before she becomes Phasma that we know of, finds this broken down Republic ship, which actually happens to be one of Emperor Palpatine's because she builds her armor from it.
Right.
There's a mining simulator in there where they see these colonies and what happened, which was a nuclear leak, which is what happened to her world, why there was radiation and what happened to it. And that's why there was no more lush green anymore. So that connects with the stories that Fern tries to scare Wim with. The mining, how how there was like a gaseous leak and they all started to eat each other. So they got locked in. She's not really far off.
Right.
I know she's trying to scare him, but those stories did come from Parnassus. So, but it wasn't just Parnassus. There were other worlds that had these facilities. So Atten could be one of them. And they were kept hush-hush. So you didn't know about them.
Right.
Wow.
Okay. So
I
there's
like
that.
Okay.
So I don't know where else you want me to go with that.
Talk about they talk about the great work. Obviously, we have these kids, taking the test, the assessment for jobs, which feels very Empire. It feels, those kids in those desks in that sterile room being taught by, a droid, kind of felt like the shots we see in Andor of Cyril working in, the cubicles and the desks and all of that.
Yep.
But they do specifically talk about the great work. And I know that that's a part of some High Republic stuff as well.
It is. So let me find that note too, because I did take notes on that. The great work. Chancellor Lena So started the great works. It was plural, it wasn't just great work, it was great works. Basically, it was to have a bigger outreach to other worlds that weren't part of the Republic to bring them in. Hence Starlight Beacon. That was part of it. Valo, like the Valo Fair, all that. She tried to get others because they didn't at the time. The planet that was home of the Ahsoka species.
Oh yeah,
escaping me.
Togruta.
So yes, they were not part of the Republic back then, and they were trying to get them, and that was part of the whole reason to have the fair at Valo. So that's where that started. Basically, they would have a certain amount of people. Most of it was Jedi at the time, but those that were able to do the outreach to bring them in, and those that had, higher IQs and talents for certain things to do this outreach and to bring these other people in based on all of that and their similarities, and to make basically to prosper in the economy. So yeah, that was part of it, which I thought that really made me like, holy crap, because
especially all the kids are learning about like finances and number matrices and all kinds of yeah.
And it's an assessment test, which I would equivalent to our SATs, something like that.
I almost took it like the what was the one that we had, the ASVAB, which was the like job readiness testing that we had to take growing up. And I thought that it was interesting in that, and it kind of, I think it will maybe develop more as it goes along. I rewatched
Emmy's onto something there, or Emmy.
Yeah, part of the first one today.
Says, what if they still think it's the High Republic? Yeah,
right.
Yep. And that's what I was going to say, because Under Secretary Farah, which I'll get to her in a minute too, she mentions that in the Republic, she doesn't say New Republic, she says the Republic. Even during the High Republic, they referred to it as the Republic. Right. So that says to me, at least in this bubble of a world, for whatever reason, I think the adults know where they are in the grand scheme of things of the timeline, but they're not telling the kids. We all know how this works. When you lie to the kids, it usually backfires.
It's gonna
Not
blow
gonna
up.
You know,
last. That's
I
right.
mean, Anakin, Ben Solo,
Yeah.
oh my God, OSHA.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, it isn't going to go very well. You lying to these kids.
That's right. Has a little bit of an Ender's Game vibe to it.
Yes. Oh, and I
Yep.
like that. Yes,
Mhm.
that was really good. So there is a lot going on there. Also, the mosaic in Fern, because Farah is Fern's mom, which we talked about that a little bit. So they have a mosaic in their house, and I took pictures, which I could send to you guys. But if you look at it, it's got a woman, which I would probably put as someone of ancestral lineage to Farah. Then there's someone that looks a lot like Wim's dad. And then there is someone that looks like the same species as Neil, and they're holding a shovel, hence mining. And then there's an Athorian. So I'm thinking those are all the main species on this world, and probably the first settlers of that colony. And I think the whole place, like if you look at that, the symbol above the woman, it's very similar in the section out. There's like stars coming out of it, lines, and almost like a map. But on the inside, it looks almost like the old retro Atari symbol.
Oh, wow.
I don't,
cool.
It really does. But it's the same symbol on the patch that she hands to Fern and says, here, you have your top class pin back, or whatever, her top class. And it's the same symbol on there. Okay. So which leads to me that it's a succession thing, that she's next in line to lead this colony, where I don't think Fern wants anything to do with it. But she also says there's not a place for everyone, though she just said in the class there's a place for everyone.
Right.
But she told Fern there's not a place for everyone at the top.
It's like the line in Caddyshack, the world needs ditch diggers. Right. So
right, you know. So there's something really weird going on. I know Star Wars Meg put out
oh yeah, I saw this.
Farah was a name of, she said, an undersecretary, which is not right. Undersecretary in Shadowfall of Alphabet Squadron, which is the second book. And Farah, yes, was arrested by Hera Syndulla, but Farah is described in that book to have very dark skin.
Okay.
This Farah does not, and the Farah in that book was an aide to the Undersecretary of the planet Troith. So there is some differences. Same name, I get it. But also, Alphabet Squadron takes place immediately after Endor. Right. If we're 5 years or more out, I don't see how. Plus, I'm just thinking of the description of the individual.
Right. Right.
So
interesting. Wow.
It is. I mean, there's a lot going on. Do I think the kids are in the dark? Absolutely. They're going to figure it out. I think that's part of the reason why Wim's dad is very alarmed that they're gone. I also think not everybody knows what Farah knows. There was one thing that really stuck out to me was the whole. Are we only talking about episode 1 or episode 2?
We can talk about both episodes. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So Fern gets really insulted when SM33 refers to them as pirates, so upset over it. And I'm thinking, you know, if these kids think they're in the wrong timeline, they're going to associate the term pirate with Nile and be really upset with that and really afraid.
Yep.
And really afraid. So that's an interesting thing to think about, because that spaceport was around during the Nile days.
Right. And it's on the Hydian Way, right? Which is right near Mandalore and other planets that we've seen recently. And I see, here's the really cool thing. This is why Star Wars is so great, and we need to just let it accept it at whatever level you want to take it at, because again, my first watch was just cool. This is fun. This is just something to it's a kid's show. This is great. And this conversation now, I'm gonna have to watch it again this weekend, which I was gonna do anyway. And I'm gonna be picking up all this stuff. And so how much do you think of the story is growing the Mandoverse? And we'll kind of come to a conclusion in our conversation with this. How much of the story is related to Mandoverse other than the timeline? And do you think it's going to feed into that lore and build up those stories as well? Or do you feel like this show is going to just kind of be more self-contained with Easter eggs all over the place like we're seeing here as well?
I definitely think it will play a part. You're not going to bring all these pirates in that we've seen in Mandalorian for no reason. I think there'll be a part in it also because I have watched quite a few of the interviews, and both the writers said that they're most looking forward to what the audience thinks by the end of the season, because everything has consequences.
Yeah.
So, and that's how they kind of left it. So this will play. I mean, everything leaves a ripple, right? It is Star Wars. It's kind of all connected to some degree. So I'm thinking this will leave a mark, you know, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see something like at least one of them again somewhere. I don't know how, but it's interesting because I love the whole basically living out, or at least living the dream of trying to become a Jedi. And that reminds me so much of Bail, in a sense, Bail Organa, because he was such a big advocate when the Empire rose, where he really wanted to clear the Jedi name. It was he wanted people to remember that the Jedi were the good guys.
Right.
You know, he didn't want people to believe what Emperor Palpatine was saying. So I like the fact that Wim is trying to keep that alive. You know, you see him playing with his action figures, and I was just like, oh my God.
And reading Jedi stories and
reading Jedi stories and playing lightsaber at the bus stop. Come on, you guys did that. I know I did that.
Yes. Flashlights, wrapping paper, whatever I had.
Whatever you could get your hands on. Absolutely.
That's it. Well, and I thought about this because I saw somewhere it just showed up in a social media feed or something, but it was one of the old teaser clips for the show. And the thing that intrigues me, talking about, this Mandoverse, Pete, like you said, where does it connect? Who's, going to bleed into that somehow? There's a shot where you've got Wendell and Farah standing at that window talking to each other. And there's that desperation of like, we have to help. We have to go get them. So it can be this story about kids lost in space, but also are these adults going to be potentially unspooling that thread, just like M says, about, what is the conspiracy of the planet? But it also begs the question, who are they going to call and say, hey, we need you to help us go find our kids? Is it going to be a Carson Teva? Is it going to be a Hondo? Like, there's any number of ways that this could go in this time frame, in this period, to make that connection and then allow those stories to then spin out from there. It could go a million places, and I can't wait to just enjoy it. I think, like we said, you hit on it early on, Becca, being transported back to being a kid. When I watched these first 2 episodes, it was very unlike most of the time when I watch shows. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't messing with my phone. I wasn't getting up to do something. Like, I was in. The hook set in early, and I just watched it, and I was like, oh, it's over now. And then, the second one was even shorter, which was disappointing. But it did take me back to kind of that childlike wonder feel of, wow, this is fun. And I think that's what I'm so excited to keep chasing as we watch these next episodes over the coming weeks, to just go, this is fun, and let's see what we get out of it.
Yep, absolutely. Good. Well, Becca, we have taken up more time than we asked for, and we really appreciate you hanging out with us. You're welcome anytime to come and talk Skeleton Crew, or whatever. I say this every time Becca's on the show, and I hope she takes it in the right way. But one of my favorite things about Tarkin's Top Shelf, there's only a handful of podcasts that I literally subscribe to and listen to in the Star Wars world, if for no other reason, because I just don't want to do other shows. But I love Tarkin's Top Shelf because I will never do their show because they read all the books. And the great thing about it is you guys let you know when there's spoilers coming. And I'm like, no, I'm here for the spoilers. Give me the whole. And that's how I get a lot of my Star Wars stories. So, and you and Mark are just great to listen to. And if you enjoyed the 25 minutes she was with us, taking these deep dives and pointing out things here and there. And that's what Tarkin's Top Shelf is all about. So please check them out, even if you don't read the books. And I imagine if I actually read the books, I would love the show even more because you're going into things that I would have read. So, but really, honestly, and I'm not just saying it because you're a good friend and you've been great with us with Podathon and just been great on the show with us. it's one of those podcasts. If you're a Star Wars fan, you got to check it out. So please do that.
Thanks, guys. And for those of you out there that are Acolyte fans, don't be discouraged. Skeleton Crew has got some beautiful High Republic nuggets in there. Just don't lose hope. Got to keep hope.
Absolutely.
Keep hope alive. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, Becca,
All
thank you
right.
so much. And thank you to everybody who's hanging out with us. Stick with us. We got the news coming up next, but we'll be back with more ATG Live. Well, welcome back to ATG Live, your Thursday night home for all things Star Wars. We talk about news. We have great guests like Becca we just had there, and I felt like maybe I was going a little bit heavy there, but I totally mean it. It's one of those, like I said, there's only a handful of shows that I listen to on the regular. I listen to a lot of other podcasts, but honestly, Tarkin Top Shelf is one of those shows that if you want to follow Star Wars and stuff that you're not probably going to pick up on, definitely check them out for sure. And Becca's just, if you thought she was sweet and friendly on the screen, that's who she is. And you get that from her and Mark, and it's great. It's great stuff. Wow. Skeleton Crew is going to be, I think, a topic of discussion for quite a while as we go through this. And Nick, I will get to it a little bit after the news too, but it feels like it's going to be harder than I expected to not overanalyze everything. I don't want to, but I feel like
honestly, it feels different. I thought about that right there at the end as we were kind of talking about that, because yes, I'm watching it with a critical eye as somebody who, does shows and talks about Star Wars. I'd love to say for a living, but for fun, be serious. But it feels different than when I've done that with other shows. Like I feel like it's a little bit more of work. This is joy. And at the same time, I'm going, hey, look at that. And I think what we're going to see, you and I, over the coming weeks, where we're going to do an immediate after show, Beyond the Barrier. Y'all check that out, join and be a patron, and you can be a part of that. But as we do that, it's going to be a lot more of the instant reaction. We talked about how on Monday we watched both episodes and then avoided texting each other so we wouldn't spoil it and ruin it and talk about all of our ideas before Tuesday night got there. We're not going to have that. We're only going to have so much time to pick up those major beats and those major details, which is what we want that show to be. And we want our patrons to be a part of those conversations. And those of y'all that may get it in the podcast feed will hopefully pick up on some of that same energy. But then the excitement comes in from Tuesday to Thursday night when we're back here doing this. Those are our chances to watch New Rock Stars, to watch Screen Crush. I watched the New Rock Stars thing today when I was at work. And I mean, they were pulling even more things that I didn't, see there's great stuff out there and there's a great way to do it. But the reality is we're having fun with it. And that's our goal.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, great. Well, Nick, as we said, there has been a lot of news this week, so why don't we get to it? Well, Nick, we are your source for all the Star Wars news of the week, and this week Hasbro is giving toys to tots. Skeleton Crew is certified fresh. Jude Law gets his star, and Filoni updates us on Ahsoka and Mando. So let's get to it. In our first story, Nick, Hasbro has unveiled exciting new additions to its Star Wars The Black Series line, including the upcoming release of Jedi Master Kel Naka and an SM-33 figure from Skeleton Crew. Fans can pre-order the Kel Naka figure starting December 4th, so that was today. Yesterday at 1 p.m. through Hasbro Pulse, participating retailers scheduled for a spring 25 release. But there they go again. Or you can order it 6 months after the show, and we'll get it to you in the spring. The 6-inch figure captures the Wookiee Jedi's detailed appearance from Star Wars The Acolyte on Disney Plus, complete with soft goods robe and a lightsaber accessory. It's going to be $34. You can probably get it at Broaxium, I'm sure. In fact, I think I saw Chris is already has it there. Get the 5% discount. Use your ATG5 and get it from somebody that you like. Additionally, Hasbro has shared that the SM-33 figure from Skeleton Crew is currently in development, though no further details have been disclosed. That might be one that I might get.
I was just thinking the same thing.
I have all my droids back here.
Yep.
I think I need to add SM-33. In a charitable move, Hasbro has partnered with Marine Toys for Tots, a children's charity, which we did work with a couple of years ago, with the goal of donating $11 million in toys to disadvantaged children this holiday season. A Hasbro representative emphasized the company's commitment to community support, stating, "At Hasbro, giving back to our local, global, and communities has been an integral part of our business since founding in 1923. The partnership aims to bring joy and a sense of inclusion to children during the holiday season, reinforcing Hasbro's dedication to creating a world where every child feels valued." And Nick, that's such a great thing. I mean, we in 2020 we did something with the Beyond the Blast Doors network where we collected Toys for Tots. We're a little late on that this year. Toys for Tots actually stops collecting about 2 weeks before Christmas. So I just want to throw out there, if you go by your local Walmart or Target or wherever they're standing, when you're inside, if you're there to get your groceries or whatever you're there for, it's a great excuse to go down the toy aisle and buy a toy that maybe you don't even, you're not going to keep, or buy two, buy one to throw in the box and one for yourself. It's so simple to do. And Toys for Tots does such amazing things.
Yeah, I agree. And we have local, there's a lot of local groups for that. And when you guys did that in 2020, I remember ordering some books on Amazon, and there's so many ways now to connect to that. If there's a local Toys for Tot, you can order, off the list and have it shipped somewhere. You can drop it off in person. But this is that time of year. And those of us that are in the position to be able to share with someone else, like, that's a very Star Warsy thing to do. You've got, reaching out, supporting, being a part of something together. So that's exciting. With the Kel Naka figure, I'm not going to order that one. You and I both talked about new figures are not really necessarily our deal.
Right.
I did see the picture of it. That's a beefy action figure, and he's a Wookiee, so he's a bigger guy. But I looked at that one and I went, wow, like, that's going to take up some space on your shelf. I will agree with you though about SM-33. I don't buy a ton of figures, but every now and then one pops up that I go, I may need to have that. Honestly, it might be a great opportunity for Disney to make that their second droid head to go along with your C-3PO.
That would be cool.
Let's get an SM-33, maybe have the little rat guy. There's a button in the back. He'll pop out and, cool. Pop back in.
Yes.
But it's always exciting when Star Wars is cranking out new toys, which they pretty much always are.
Sure,
now, you may not get them for a year, but they're out there.
I still don't understand how Hasbro, look, I get it. Clearly they were successful in hiding Grogu, and that made that surprise so great. But honestly, there's no reason why a SME can't be available right this second.
I think at this point, it simply is it's the utmost dedication to honoring the history of the pre-order from 1977.
Right.
The figures. Here's a postcard that tells you'll get your figures in 6 months.
They want to go back to that. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. Well, Pete, we have another story as we keep this moving along. Skeleton Crew is Rotten Tomatoes fresh. Like you said, we're going to talk a lot about Skeleton Crew in the coming weeks. Disney Skeleton Crew, the latest addition to the Star Wars universe, has debuted to glowing reviews, earning an impressive 95% critic score and an 86% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. The series has been praised for its blend of adventure charm and its ability to appeal to audiences of all ages. These scores position Skeleton Crew among some of the best-rated Star Wars projects in recent history. It ranks below Andor, which holds 96% critics and 87% audience score, but passes highly regarded entries like The Mandalorian, which is 90% and 78 respectively, as well as The Force Awakens, which comes in at 93 and 84. Unlike other projects that have faced polarized reactions, Skeleton Crew has managed to avoid significant controversy. Now, granted, we're 3 days in. Audience score aligns closely with its critical acclaim, showcasing a level of consistency not always seen in the franchise. For comparison, The Last Jedi suffered from a wide disparity with a 91% critic score, but only 41% from audiences. Meanwhile, Acolyte, still awaiting its release, currently holds an 18% audience score amid accusations of review bombing, which we saw a little bit of. With its nostalgic, Goonies-inspired tone, Skeleton Crew introduces fresh characters and mysteries to the Star Wars universe. Starring Jude Law and a young, talented cast, the series has already sparked discussions about a potential future. For now, Skeleton Crew represents a much-needed win for Disney and Star Wars fans alike. So, Pete, here's my question for you on this particular story. With news like this, there's only 2 episodes out. Is this a good sign for Disney Star Wars, or are we bathed in the early glow of something shiny and new?
So I've become a bit of a pessimist. The whiter my beard has gotten, the more pessimistic I've gotten. It's really interesting to see, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, that the usual cast of characters who hate everything that's got that Disney Plus logo on it before it even comes out, a number of them are positive on the show. They're not giving glowing reviews because they want to be, they got to keep their brand going. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that maybe this could be a little bit of a shift. And I think there's a couple things that went into it. Number one, I think they were extremely wise to hold on to the show. This show was ready to go at the beginning of the year.
Right.
It was completed. It was in the can. So hopefully they took some of that extra time to work on the effects and the depth of the images and really make it feel consistent and cohesive. But I think that we are coming into a new age of Star Wars where they're really taking their time with things. I mean, every time they talk about the Rey movie being pushed out or whatever controversy allegedly is happening there, I always look at it as a good thing. Let's take our time. Let's let things breathe and be done right. And so from that perspective, I'm hoping that I'm cautiously optimistic. We are just 2 episodes in. There will be something in the next couple episodes that is going to light a fire. I don't know what it is. Obviously, we haven't seen it, but there's going to be some character is going to have 2 moms, or there's going to be something that somebody's going to have purple hair. A speeder's going to go too slow. A ship is not going to match what it should have based on Wikipedia. Something is going to set them off. And the question will be, will the Rotten Tomato raters go and do what they do? And will that impact the show? At the end of the day, Rotten Tomatoes doesn't matter, but it kind of does because it becomes a flag that people wave. So you can't wave the flag when it's failing and take a win in that. And then when it's doing well, say it doesn't matter. So I just say it doesn't matter all the time. So
I think that's exactly it. And, yes, we're in the shiny new, this just came out 2 days ago. There's plenty of time for things to change. I don't think it will necessarily, and I'm certainly not looking at it, expecting it to. But the reality is there's a lot of people out there and somebody's going to pick something apart whenever. Exactly. I do think, and I liked your point about, the show has been ready for a while and they did take the time to wait before they released it. I think we'd all be foolish to not understand that the holidays has a lot to do with that. We're coming into a time where people are going to be together, especially families who have kids. And this is a family friendly targeted thing. So let's have some episodes banked up for Christmas break because not everybody's going to watch it when it drops on Tuesday night like we are. But you're going to have families with younger kids that are going to be like, hey, Christmas break's coming and we can all watch Skeleton Crew together and curl up on the couch because we're home and spending some time. So I do think it was a great move.
Yep. I agree. And Star Wars has become, ever since Disney purchased Lucasfilm, I think Star Wars feels better in December around the holidays, the movies, as excited as I am that we're going to get to the Mando story in a couple minutes, but as excited as I am that that's on the horizon, I kind of wish it was coming around Christmas, but that's a story that we'll talk about in just a couple minutes. Yep. So in the meantime, we do have more to talk about here. And then Jude Law, the star of Disney Plus's Skeleton Crew, will be honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on December 12th, coming up next week. Variety has confirmed that this will happen in Los Angeles. The recognition places Law among a growing list of Star Wars luminaries to receive this accolade, including Ewan McGregor, Carl Weathers. Both received theirs earlier this year, and details about the ceremony, which typically is live streamed, are going to be coming out very soon. Law's contribution to the Star Wars franchise may be new, but his career spans decades and includes a range of iconic roles. And man, talk about a chameleon. He played Dr. John Watson in Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes.
Yep.
He was Jan Rog in Captain Marvel, and he was a younger Albus Dumbledore in the Fantastic Beasts trilogy. Easy for me to say. Beyond his blockbuster performances, he's also earned critical acclaim for roles in films like The Talented Mr. Ripley and Closer. I always think of him from AI. I thought he was fantastic in that movie.
Yep.
In Skeleton Crew, he portrays John Nanawood, a mysterious character who has already intrigued fans despite his very limited screen time in the first 2 episodes. While his intentions remain unclear, speculation surrounds whether he is a former Jedi or a morally ambiguous pirate. The Hollywood Walk of Fame has long celebrated Star Wars talented individuals with Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Ming-Na Wen. Law's induction underscores his impact not only on Star Wars, but also on the wider entertainment industry. Fans of Skeleton Crew and Law's illustrious career have much to celebrate this December. Nick, I'm going to ask the very blunt question.
Yep.
Does a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame mean anything?
I think it does. And I think it's something that almost falls into like a People's Choice Award category. Like,
yeah.
I don't know who specifically votes on this. I've not taken the time to dig completely in this. I'm sure it has something to do maybe with the city of Hollywood proper, because we're talking about sidewalks and, some of that kind of stuff. I do think it's important because I have multiple friends who go out to California, go to Hollywood for the first time, and there's pictures of them when they come across a star of their favorite, celebrity or actor or whoever it is. We've been tuned into this for the last several years because of Star Wars, folks, and we've seen, some of those have come later. Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, like those stars came later than we would have initially, anticipated. We've gotten some of the newer ones more recently. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a way for these actors to come together. They bring out their friends to kind of come do some introductions for them. I think that's special. The one with Ewan, Hayden was there, and that was such a touching moment for him to get to talk about his friend and the relationship they've built over what they've done. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a fun thing. There's plenty of sidewalks in Hollywood that, can add some stars to, and why not, give us something else to go take a photo op with.
Yeah. No, and it's if I understand it correctly, it's usually paid for by the agency of the actor or their management, and it's usually there are some times where it truly is sort of a lifetime achievement kind of thing, and then a lot of times the timing is around other events that they're involved in. So it's not surprising that Jude Law is getting his star while Skeleton Crew comes out. It wasn't surprising that when I saw Rush get their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, that they were just about to kick off a major tour. It kind of is connected to that. But I couldn't go get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You couldn't. Yeah. So it's, there's a committee for it, and it's bought and paid for, but you have to like go through, I don't know what the process is for them to go, yeah, you're worthy, you should be here. So
there's still some sort of criteria.
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay, well,
cool.
I'll take it.
All right.
Well, we've got another story here, and this is one that I have been excited to continue to keep an eye on. Filoni updates on Ahsoka and Mando. Dave Filoni, creator and showrunner of several Star Wars projects you may have heard of, confirmed that The Mandalorian and Grogu has completed filming. Speaking in an interview with Extra TV, Filoni also shared updates on Ahsoka Season 2, revealing that he is still writing and currently remains the sole writer on the series. Filoni has approximately 6 months left to finalize and polish the script for Ahsoka Season 2, assuming that the previously kind of announced planned summer 2025 filming schedule will hold. Additional news about the series is expected at Star Wars Celebration Japan in April of 2025. Filoni expressed excitement about reuniting with the cast and crew for another season. He acknowledged the challenges of writing in the increasingly complex New Republic era. A lot of that is his own doing, by the way. In related news, the Mandalorian and Grogu film is on track for a May 22nd, 2026 release. So far, Pedro Pascal, Sigourney Weaver, and Zeb Orrelios, one of everyone's favorite Star Wars Rebels characters who was seen in Mando Season 3, are confirmed to be appearing. The first trailer for the film is anticipated to possibly also debut at Star Wars Celebration next April in Japan. Filoni also commented on advancements in animatronic technology, which was used for the Grogu puppet, hinting at the possibility of expanded physical capabilities for the character in the upcoming film. Star Wars fans eagerly, much like myself, await more updates as these projects to continue to unfold. So, Pete, the question for you on this news story is, we have talked many times with some of our friends who are writers about the positives and negatives of a writer's room versus a single scribe for a show. Same thing can be said. This conversation has been had about directors on projects. Do you have multiple directors? Do you have somebody doing the whole thing? How do you feel about the idea of Dave Filoni taking on the writing of this particular series all on his own?
Yeah, so he kind of confirmed, well, not didn't kind of, he confirmed that he is the sole writer of Ahsoka. Yeah, you know, I honestly think that's probably not a bad thing. I don't know. I'd rather them have one director on all X number of episodes than one, because look, like it or not, I didn't, you know, my feelings on the Kenobi series, it had its flaws, it had its great things. The story was cohesive and it had just one director. It was just Deborah Chow. I didn't love her style for all of it, but it didn't feel jarring. Like, I think that was the biggest problem for Acolyte. The flashback episodes were done by a director who had a completely different style than everybody else, and it just didn't feel like the same show, and whatever, blah blah blah. That said, I'm really torn, Nick, to be honest with you, because there is so much happening. We were talking a little bit before about how Skeleton Crew, is that going to build the lore of the Mandoverse? And if it does, like, how do they make sure that there's enough control over that, right? So you don't have all the inconsistencies. But on the other hand, you don't want it to, Lucasfilm is not Dave Filoni, right? It's not just him. And you see great stories coming out in things like Skeleton Crew. I don't know. I guess my very long-winded response is, I think I would like to see him as the showrunner, but with a handful of additional writers working with it.
Absolutely.
It took me a long time to get there, but
yeah, well, that's okay. And that's a question that, you know, we've kicked it around with, you know, folks like Jim and Tim and Greg from Yubnub, who are all TV writers, and the different parts of that. That's been a big part of the discussion over the sequel trilogy, which is, you know, the three, you know, the different directors, a JJ who then transitioned to a Rian Johnson who made choices, and then, you know, it goes back to JJ. So that's not unusual, because in the original trilogy you had different directors. For the sequel, I mean, for the prequels, George Lucas directed all of those, but it's such a varying thing. And I think we're going to actually maybe have a chance to talk to Greg next week. So maybe that's something that we can throw his way and just ask some more of that question about a writer's room versus, you know, that solo writing, because the same thing we've talked about with Andor with, what's his name?
Tony Gilroy.
Yeah, Tony Gilroy, you know, running that whole thing.
But what's interesting about, well, he's the showrunner, but he's not the writer on all of them. And I think that's
right. He's not the writer, but isn't he? Is he directing them all?
He's directing a couple. No, he's like the showrunner. He's sort of the overarching. I think he's got the first and last or something like that. But to your point, it's Tony's vision, right? And that was what worked for the original trilogy. It was George's vision, but he had three different directors.
But he had Irving Kershner. He had, those guys.
Those guys. But he didn't have a different director, and he didn't have other writers involved in the prequels. Now, let's admit, the prequels have a completely different feel than the original trilogy. I don't care how much we love them both. They're like two different styles, but it's like the difference between Frank Herbert Dune and Herbert's son and
Denis Villeneuve.
Anderson. The way they write Kevin J. Anderson, the way they write Dune.
Right.
they're the same universe, but it's a
Very
different thing. So I don't know. It's I guess the jury is still out on that. I mean, look, I think he was the sole writer of the first season of Ahsoka, and he Game of Throned it, man. It was like the first 7 episodes were flowing and going well, and then he jammed the ending in and rushed it and slammed on the brakes. So I do worry about that. He's not a great director either. I hate to say that, but you know, his episodes of Mando and while they're good stories, they're not the best directed. So,
and I think that's another, you know, kind of sorting out the roles with Favreau, with him. You know, we've had shows in the past that, you know, there's the showrunner idea.
Yep.
You know, it's a vision. It's somebody who's overseeing. It's a, you know, I guess a TV version of like Feige running the Marvel universe. You know, a Favreau, a Filoni, because you have so much talent in. I mean, Bryce Dallas Howard, she's one of my favorite directors of all the most recent Star Wars stuff. You know, I'm excited to see what the different directors for these episodes of Skeleton Crew are going to look like. We've seen the list of that with the Daniels, with, you know, John Watts. Bryce Dallas Howard is doing one of these. It's an interesting thing to go. And I know writers and directors are a little bit different, but it's something to keep an eye on. And like I said, I'd love to lean on Greg, maybe if we talk to him next week, to dig into that a little bit more.
That's great. Cool. I agree. And I think that they need to work it out, because I think that has been the problem. Book of Boba Fett was all Rodriguez.
Yeah, Robert Rodriguez.
And I had issues with that, with that show. Again, I loved it's so funny. I always feel like, and this is the stupid thing about Star Wars fandom, and haha to all you people out there who've been beating up Star Wars and now you like something. Look what happens. We're big Star Wars fans, but we do, you know, we have the real conversations. I feel like Book of Boba Fett would have benefited from an additional writer, right? I think an additional showrunner, but we digress, and we could go on about that all day. But when we do dig into shows, it's on Tuesday nights when we do our Beyond the Barrier show, which is brand new, which will happen right after, as soon as that. Well, not as soon as, because I think we're going to at the top of the hour. So if it's 9 o'clock East on Tuesday nights, 10 o'clock East, we will jump in and record our podcast. Now, here's the thing about that show. In order to join us live and bring your ideas and your thoughts and actually call in and be a part of the show, you need to be a patron. Go to patreon.com/the SSW Network. Our lowest level is $3 a month. Join at that level. Not only are you going to be able to join us and give us your ideas and your thoughts, you're also going to get swag. You're going to get some other special options. If you can't join us, and we totally understand and we get it, join us in the podcast stream.
There's also a voicemail number. That's what I'm.
There's a voicemail. Sure. Yes. 504-321-1501. You can leave us your message, and we'll get to it the following week. But you can listen to the Beyond the Barrier in the podcast stream the next day. Listen, if you're not going to join us, that's fine. Like I said, $3 a month. I get it. But just leave us a 5-star review. Call a friend, tell a friend, share the show, tell people. When people say, because it happens all the time on social media, hey, can you name some Star Wars podcasts I should be listening to? Name Around the Galaxy and the SSW Network, and we would be honored if you would join us, as Darth Vader would say. So that's Tuesday night in the podcast stream. You're going to get the Beyond the Barrier show on Wednesdays. On Friday mornings, if you miss this show live, you're going to get your news show. You're going to bring those news stories that you just heard. They'll be there. And as we get different guests, we'll be putting them into the podcast stream. So stick around for that. Nick, next Thursday, we have a couple possibilities, as you alluded to, Greg. We also have the possibility of former Star Wars insider who might join us as well. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But Nick, I think we have made it to the end of the show.
I think so. I think we've done all the damage we need to do tonight.
I think we've done all we can. Our work is done here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in the chat here on YouTube. And if you caught us on Twitter, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate your time and hanging out and giving us your comments, your thoughts. Nick, may the Force be with you.
Always.
Just one more round, friend, then homeward bound, friend. Don't forget me in your dreams. Just one more song, friend, and then so long, friend. friend. The nights get shorter, it seems. Just one more rhyme, friend. Yes, it's a crime, friend. But you know time, friend. Time can fly. So it's good night, friend. Good night, but not goodbye.